Hey, big fucking dreamers. So pumped to be here with you today with a special guest. I have Samantha Gold. She is the founder and CEO of Motette, which is an elevated children's brand. It's launching in March. I actually love the clothes. Like, she put out a onesie that is so fire that I'm like, I need this onesie. It is like the cutest thing I've ever seen. She is my sister in sobriety. She is just an all around amazing, highly accomplished woman. And we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship today. We're going to be talking about ambition today. We're going to be talking about self doubt. So I can't wait for you guys to listen to this. And Samantha Gold, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
So excited to have you on the Big Fucking Dreamers podcast. Let's hop right in because you and we kind of have some similar stories in a lot of ways where both working at big tech companies. You've had a big career in tech sales, working at a few different companies, like big stint at Salesforce, and then you have decided to leave. You were the CEO of another brand, but you've decided to leave that and to start your own business. So a lot of my clients actually, they're really interested in leaving corporate to start their own businesses. So first of all, like, what has that transition been like from corporate to entrepreneurship? And what are some of the things that you've considered when you've done that?
I would say first and foremost, it's been really scary. I've had to overcome a lot of fear on a daily basis. I think in hindsight, if I could go back and do it again, I probably would have started my business on the side before leaving my full-time job. We had a bit of a different, unique situation where my husband was relocated to Sydney, Australia. Previously, we were living in Charleston, and I was running a clothing company there. At first, I was going to launch the clothing brand in Australia, but we just decided that it would be too difficult for me to continue my full-time position, around the other side of the world and continuing managing and leading the team. And so at that point, I decided to make the transition to go all in on Motette and build my elevated brand of children's clothing.
Curious, like, of what you said there on why you would have decided to stay in your full time role and not just kind of dive in, like what the thought process around that is.
Yeah, definitely. I think early on in the, I guess, like exploration process, right? There was a lot of waiting period. So, a little bit of background, I decided to launch a product based business. And as part of that, I had to research different factories and who I was going to work with and what I was going to focus on. And so, with that came a lot of waiting. And so, it took about 30 days for me to get back samples after I submitted them. And so, it was kind of this waiting period where I really was at the mercy of these factories, waiting to get those samples in. And I couldn't really make a lot of decisions until then or do a lot of work. I think had I continued with my full time position, I definitely would have had the capacity to do so. I would have been in a better situation had I had more of my ducks in a row prior to leaving the company in terms of having some of those decisions made to go kind of all in before making that jump, if that makes sense.
I think that some people as well can like have just really be like, okay, I just want to go all in. Like, I don't like my corporate job. I know I want to leave it. And I'm not necessarily having time. Both of us just went all in as well. Then there's like a lot of fear that comes with that. I want to go into like a little bit of like the fear and the self doubt. And actually, before we go there, I want to talk about like the financial side of it because this is something that I always advise people. And how were you looking at, especially having a product based business? How are you looking at the finances of when you were about to leave to start your own business?
That's a huge factor. That's another reason, right? It would have been great to continue earning while launching this business and have that income coming in. I split my finances 50-50 with my husband. I have two kids. I'm responsible for childcare, rent payments, all of the things. So it's definitely a big factor. And I did put, all of my life savings into building Motat. And financially, what that looks like, again, being a product based business, I was running the math prior to our conversation today, probably all in for 1 year of running the business and also inventory expenses, I would say is about $200,000. And that's for bulk inventory orders. That's for legal costs, things like trademarks, patents, marketing expenses, and then as well as my cost of living.
Yeah, this is something that I think people overlook. I talk to a lot of people who maybe more want to start service-based businesses, but more want to start like coaching, but usually coaching businesses. I get a lot of questions around that. But my advice is always imagine that you were not making revenue at all for 1 year. And like, say you made zero money. What would that look like? Do you have enough money to set aside and enough money, especially because you don't have a proof of concept yet? And it can be so scary, especially working for these more established businesses, like working for Salesforce or working for LinkedIn and thinking, okay, I have an established brand. And then all of a sudden you're kind of like thrown in the deep end. No one really knows you. No one knows your product. You're building something from scratch. So I want to talk a little bit just about like the self-doubt. Because I know you and I have spoken about this at length, but just like the self-doubt and almost like the darkness that you like have to overcome and like wade through with entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think I struggle with it on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of a roller coaster of emotions. And I know you and I were talking about this leading up to the podcast today, but I think the biggest thing is that I decided to build my brand in public. And so I started that process a couple months ago where I'm sharing with my audience the day-to-day of what it actually takes to build a brand from scratch. And so like literally I'll post a photo of a call with my business coach or a factory conversation I'm having where we go through my samples. And I will say like that has helped me so much with not being as lonely and also helping build my confidence because I'm getting encouragement from these people that started out as strangers and are now kind of bought into strategy behind building Motette. And so that's been so fun. And I really do feel like so much less lonely as an entrepreneur having done that because I literally am posting things like my prints for my PJs and getting people to basically take polls and vote on what they like most. Whereas before I launched my social media, I was making these decisions in isolation. And so I would have a lot of fear and a lot of doubt like, is this going to resonate with my audience or not? You know, my business coach recommended, she said, just start, just get on there and just start. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be messy. You know, what's going to resonate more is authenticity than it looking perfect. And like, she could not have been more right. And I think for me, I am such a perfectionist. I had in my mind this like beautiful grid on Instagram and I needed to hire a social media agency. And I actually did hire a social media agency. And about a week or 2 weeks into that agreement, I decided to take it over on my own because they were using content that was like a month old and it just didn't align with the vision that I had for wanting to really create the brand and share what I was doing in real time. And so it was like the fear of the unknown of like, I don't know about social media. I have such a love-hate relationship with social media personally. I don't know how to edit videos. And like, guess what? I learned how to do it in a day. And then like a week later, I could create like 10 reels in now 30 minutes, which is insane. I never thought I could do that. And it's just about getting started. And you realize that like you can do it and you'll quickly build your confidence when you do.
Let's dive into the authenticity piece. And I as well, I love the we were talking about this the other day. I love the like names of your brand. So your kind of ideal client is like a bit of like a bougie bitch, right? And she's like an elevated woman, wants cute clothes for her kids. She's like would rather die than put her child in like a live, laugh, love with sparkles. Can you just talk about a little bit of that about like how you started naming your prints? Because I think that like those are like the names of your prints are like some of my favorite. That's like my favorite part of your brand.
I think going back to like authenticity too, my brand truly is a reflection of me. I came up with the idea for Motette after the birth of my two kids because I could not find elevated PJs for kids. There's nothing I hate more than putting my kids in like a cartoon or Disney or slogan or sequenced outfit. And it was so hard for me to find beautiful prints on these simple classic styles, right? Like I'm talking about like onesies and two-piece PJs. I'm not talking about like $100, occasion dresses. I'm talking about everyday pieces that they can sleep in and then wear for play or to daycare or whatever they're doing. I wanted the brand to be a reflection of me, going back to like, that fear, that confidence of the unknown, the not knowing what I didn't know. Like, was this going to resonate with people? What I'm finding is that I'm getting messages from other other moms being like, yes, I like the wait is over. I've finally found my people. Okay, there are other moms out there. As part of my launch, I have about 8 different prints that I am launching, 4 for girls and 4 for boys. First, I asked my audience to come up with names, and then I polled my audience based on the suggestions that I got. Some of the names are like pomegranate soiree, pistachio gingham, spring symphony, Pacific stripe, just to name a few.
I love that. When I went to name this podcast, like the first name of it, I think it was like Healthy High Performance. Oh, I want to just, that's accessible. I don't want to alienate myself. One of my friends who's like kind of a bit of my brand consultant, like we came up with the name Big Fucking Dreams. It felt so me. It also felt like a little bit edgy and a little bit risky. Is that going like, are people not going to want to work with me because of that? Then I should do it because it's actually a reflection of who I am and what my voice is. I know that you like had a little bit of it's hesitancy or fear about sharing your sobriety story as well, because you are sober, you've been sober for a length of time. And does that really fit in with the brand aesthetic? I definitely share my sobriety journey. I'm very open, like, publicly that I'm sober, and it's really, like, a big part of who I am, but I'm wondering, like, what that was like for you about how you viewed that and how you decided to share that.
Yeah, I think it kind of started a few months ago when I really shared with my LinkedIn audience a little bit more insight into my journey. And that included getting fired from a previous position. And I think the biggest thing is that nobody gives a shit. Like, we're so worried about what other people are going to say or they're going to judge us. And oh my God, like, am I going to wake up and the world has ended? Like, guess what? Nobody cares. The only people that are still thinking about it, like, is you, right? And so this has honestly been a journey of me forgiving myself for the things that I did in my past, just like letting go of it. I have to go back to that because I can forget that on a day-to-day basis. It's like even leading up to this conversation, I was on a podcast where we talked about sobriety and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to share that with my audience on social media. And I did. And all that I get is like positive responses, or people just like skip to the next story and they don't really care because it's not relevant to them. We make things out to be so much of a bigger deal than they actually are in reality. Going back to authenticity, it is part of my story. It is who I am. And guess what? Like addiction, alcoholism, it affects, people from all walks of life. And so hopefully by sharing my journey, it's going to help someone, maybe another elevated mom who's, struggling today, that I might be able to help by sharing that.
Could you share a little bit more about the story where you got fired? Because I think I'm sure like people listening are like, wait, how did she get fired? Like what happened there? Like and like I think it's a really interesting story as well.
So I mentioned that we moved back to Sydney. I actually went to college here. So I studied abroad in Sydney and decided to start my career here at Salesforce. And addiction alcoholism really like runs rampant in my family. And so I knew that it was something that I was always going to have to be mindful of. Most of the time, I really lived in denial about that. I did end up moving back to Chicago. At the time, I thought it was an ex here in Sydney that was the problem. And I moved back to Chicago, with my employer at the time and ended up getting promoted to a leadership position. And honestly, that was when the wheels really like fell off. I think when I was an individual contributor, I could really hide out and pretend like I was, going to meetings, when really I was like hungover in bed, like filled with so much anxiety and shame. And for me, like I never drank every day. I never drank even every weekend. It was just that like when I did, I went from 0 to 100. And so for me, like my rock bottom, it's actually my sobriety date is Valentine's Day. And we're coming up on 7 years next month. And I was in Las Vegas for sales kickoff. And I went into that trip and I said, I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm not going to drink during this week. I'm going to show up to all the sessions and be present. And of course, like night one, that didn't happen. That was the breaking point, when I decided to get sober. And I ended up actually taking a leave of absence, and going to treatment. And I think at that point, like the writing was kind of like on the wall with work where at that point they were probably like looking for a reason to get rid of me, which I like totally understand looking back on it. And I own my part in that. But when I came back from treatment, we removed the alcohol and we think we're cured. We're still left with ourselves. I wasn't the best version of myself at that point. I was leading a team at Salesforce, and someone on my team had asked me about our compensation plan. And I kind of made a joke that, like, it was ridiculous that she hadn't read the plan and didn't really know the ins and outs of how to make and earn commission. And I ended up like imitating her, when she wasn't present in front of the team. And that got back to her and ultimately to HR. And so I got fired for, mocking my employee. And that, I did that. I wouldn't do that today, but I
Mhm.
have to own that I did that. And I was let go from that position.
Oh, I've definitely had a few rock bottoms after, like, Vegas sales kickoffs, let me tell you, and I think when when I was still drinking, I could think of a few times where I'm like, "This is really unwell," like, things are getting really dark. I think a lot of people would be at tech companies right now and probably know someone, or maybe they're experiencing it themselves. And the last sales kickoff, someone messaged me and said, "Someone on my team is, like, drinking, can you talk to them?" And yeah, the powerlessness of that comes with that, especially in these large environments when you do have a problem, and how it's like, it's so difficult thinking like, are you going to go into it? What's your behavior going to be like when you're there? Are you gonna drink? Are you not gonna drink? And kind of all that obsession around it. But I also just want to point out, like, in what you said about owning your story, like I think that there are certain shadows of us. Like, I shared on a podcast, like, one time I got an HR violation for being blacked out and yelling at a manager, and I had to, like, sign a document saying that I was blacked out. And I remember saying to my therapist, "Do you think I have a drinking problem?" And her saying, "People that don't have a drinking problem don't ask that question." You and I have both built successful careers after that, and also a huge part of what you said is, like, I own my part in this. Like, I own my part in my story and my behavior.
I asked so many therapists if I had a drinking problem, and they actually said no, and then I realized I wasn't honest with my therapist.
Like, "No, you have 2 drinks a week." It's like, "Yeah, do I?" "Oh, I'm just paying you to lie, or paying you so I can lie to you." What does this look like? You're coming up on 7 years sober. What and there's been a huge value shift. Like, what does that look like in terms of, because it sounds to me like you kind of had to then rebuild your life. Like, you went into treatment, you, like,
Yeah.
left Salesforce, and you would then had to rebuild your life. And I'm wondering, like, what does that actually look like for someone that is struggling with something like that?
I ended up going back to an individual contributor role at another tech company. I would say like those first few years of sobriety were pretty dark. I was kind of emotionally, mentally at a rock bottom. I had lost all my confidence. They've found me out, like I'm not a good leader. I'm not, a good salesperson, and I just had so much self-doubt. And I had to really do a lot of work on myself to rebuild that. That work was done in the rooms of AA, going through step work, working on myself, making amends, also working with different therapists, and this time being honest about my experiences, and working through, some stuff from my past with my family and growing up in an alcoholic household and how that impacted me. Didn't happen overnight. It was a long, long process. And I think slowly I did rebuild my confidence. I ended up meeting my husband actually through recovery. I went to Miami at the beginning of COVID and met him in the rooms there of AA. And we, as good addicts and alcoholics do, I think we moved in together about a week later. We're married about 6 months later. And then came, my daughter Blair a year later, and now we have a son, Wes, too. But we ended up moving to Charleston. Both of our careers went remote during COVID, started doing some consulting on the side, and I ended up meeting, a founder of a women's clothing company. And, at the time, there were 2 co-founders, and one of the co-founders ended up stepping down, and she was the business side. And so my friend, who was the head designer, needed someone to come in and really run the business. And I said, like, basically, like, "Put me in, coach. Like, I can do this. Hire me as your CEO." And I almost feel like that right there was such like a pivotal moment of me stepping back into this leadership capacity, not just like any leadership capacity from a manager perspective. It was like the leadership, the leader, the CEO of the company. And that was incredible. And I think by then I'd really gotten my confidence back where I was like, I am a good leader. I am a good person. I care about my employees. I care about the success of this company. And I know that I can make a difference and help scale and grow this business. And so, again, it was a journey. It didn't happen overnight. But I think by doing the work every single day, taking action, I was able to ultimately get there.
A lot of people struggle with confidence, and I'm wondering because you're saying, "Okay, I got my confidence back." So, like, for anyone listening that has kind of put like a setback, whether that be maybe it's put on a performance plan, or maybe it's like being made redundant, or maybe it is being fired, or maybe it is whatever. Like, and you say, okay, I actually got my confidence back. Like, what do you think the tactical steps were that allowed you to step into that confidence to then say, no, put me in, like, let me be that CEO. I'm ready to do this.
I think it was like really reflecting on, all my past success and letting go of the mistakes that I had made. It just goes back to like forgiving yourself. Like you're your toughest critic and you have to do the work to let go of that shame or that anxiety that you feel that's like really holding you back. It does have to do with like we talk about like spiritual, mental, physical, like how are you taking care of yourself in all of those areas and like filling your buckets, right? Like at least for me, I guess in my experience, like I can't be, eating crap, not working out, and expect to feel 100% confident in myself as a founder and CEO. Like, I have to be taking care of every aspect of myself in order for my relationships to thrive. It really like show up as a mom, as a friend, as a wife, like spiritually, mentally, physically. I have to be doing that work on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's just like those baby steps every single day, connecting and sharing with other people who are going through similar struggles, like how you and I connect, Hannah, leaning into, what we call like the fellowship of the program, where it's like we're not alone, right? When we go through things in isolation, it can be really overwhelming. But as soon as we kind of step outside of that, there's so many like free tools and resources out there and programs for whatever it is you might be struggling with. There's so much power in sharing it and building that community.
Yeah, and I think that, like, what I see, especially in my group programs that I did really model off of AA, is that oftentimes people think that they're alone. And I know you and I, both of us are really building businesses, and both of us have left corporate. Both of us, are like one-man teams with contractors, but like we're the only full-time employees in our business, and like what that isolation can feel like. And it can be super isolating, and it's not until we've spoken about it and I've spoken about it with other entrepreneurs that I like feel like, okay, there is a sense of community here. I don't have to do this all alone. I don't have to be more isolated. We spoke a little bit about almost like feeling the fear and doing it anyway. That's something that I really hear in your story over like, okay, going for the CEO position, like really building your brand and just figuring out how to do it on social media and push through that. I'm wondering what you would say to someone who maybe is in corporate right now and they're thinking, okay, I want to take the next step. I want to build something, but I'm super afraid of what my colleagues think, or I'm super afraid that I'm not going to make any money, or I'm really afraid to like lose the security of like this stability, but I know this isn't my dream. What would you say to that person?
First and foremost, what do my colleagues think? I'm like putting myself out there and like posting on LinkedIn. Like that was my biggest fear. Who gives a fuck what they think? If they are not going to support me, then they can unfollow me, like they can remove the connection. What is my cousin going to think? Like that's what I'm worried about. Like, no, I want to make money. Okay. Like I want to be able to support my family. It's like these random people in our lives that we're so afraid of their judgment or scrutiny. Let them judge us, right? Who cares? You gotta just like let go of that. I think when I was the CEO of the women's clothing company, but also in stepping into starting my own business, is that All of our experiences are cumulative, and what I mean by that is, like, I'm leaning so heavily right now on all of my past sales experience, and so it's not a waste, right? Like, all of the skills that you're learning, in corporate America are going to apply in some way or another that you may not even know how or when, but it's going to actually serve you. I'm doing so much prospecting, and I was like SDR of the year at Salesforce in Sydney, and I am SDR of the year for Motette right now. Like, the number of like DMs that I'm sending to influencers and following up and, like tracking that on a daily basis. Like it's again just leaning on all of those tools that I mastered over a decade-long career in tech sales.
It's so funny because, like, literally, like, I've led, teams with, like, millions and for millions and millions of dollars, and then now I am also an SDR. Like, I am an SD in my business. You better fucking recognize that I'm sending you an email, like, I'm following up. It's so hilarious, and it's so true. I don't know if you felt like this yet, but we have a mutual friend, Maggie, who's the CEO and founder of this amazing lingerie company, Thistle Inspire, but I think sometimes that early on in my business, like, I did find it quite demoralizing, like, being so early in and, like, also early on, I wasn't making any money. That kind of fear and self-doubt of, like, look at what I left to kind of, like, do this and be working so hard and just feeling like a fucking idiot on LinkedIn, like, and on Instagram and being like, "Who is reading this stuff? Like, does anyone care?" I don't know if you have felt like that. And really what has helped me get through, like, the demoralization is, like, I just continue showing up, and I just, like, continue doing it, continue chasing my dreams, and I've really had to, like, really embed growth mindset into it and be like, "Okay, I don't yet know how to build, like, a multi-seven-figure business right now, but I will. Like, I can figure things out. This is how I'm doing it. I can't really care what people think," and just, like, continually pushing past that. I don't know if you felt that at all.
I'm in the pre-launch phase, and so, my website will be live in March, and like, fingers crossed, people buy from me and I make some money. It is scary to leave that. When I was, the CEO of the women's clothing company, like, my compensation, I had asked for them to match my on-target earnings for my tech job, and so to walk away from that is really scary. But again, it's just about this like faith and belief in myself that like I'm capable and I can do it. Just believing in myself and like a belief in like a higher power, right? I don't know if people listening are religious, but like I really strongly believe that like asking your higher power like either bless this venture or block it. Like will lead me down that path. And I think that's so true of like me just making decisions on a daily basis or me even like picking my factory, right? And like leaning into like trusting my gut, trusting my instinct with experiences that I'm having, like it never fails me. And so if your gut is saying like you're not happy in this career, and there's something bigger out there for you, like trust that, right? Like, what's the alternative? You make good money, but you're unhappy. And like for me, I just got to a point where I was like, the risk outweighed the reward. Like this was a huge blessing. We had sold our house in Charleston, and the market there was like super strong. Especially like during COVID, a lot of people moved there. And so when we sold our house, we had a really good, like great profit on it that I was able to put towards, investing in the company. But even if I hadn't gotten that, like there's small business loans out there, there's ways for you to really like make it happen. And so start, like start exploring the options, do some research. Honestly, ChatGPT is like my best friend. My husband makes fun of me for like how much I lean on ChatGPT. But whenever I don't know anything, I literally go to ChatGPT. Whenever I don't know like which is like all the time, I don't know how to caption my Instagram post, ChatGPT. I didn't know the difference between SKUs and barcodes, ChatGPT. Like it's literally helped me answer every single question and overcome my fear because it breaks it down like in such a simple, digestible format.
Yeah, ChatGPT is, like, for sure the MVP of my business.
ChatGPT named my company. Okay. Like, I was like, submitted so many names to my trademark attorney, brand, and every single one got rejected. And the last name that I had come up with was Petite Motif because all my brand is based off of like really beautiful prints. And so I said, ChatGPT, come up with a made up word off of Petite Motif, and it came up with Motette, and it was accepted. So there you go.
I actually just put into ChatGPT because it obviously has all this information on my business. I want to write a book in 2026. Like, what should my book be about? Like a self-help book. And then it just came up with really like a million good ideas. And I was like, okay, great. So interesting. I met with a client yesterday and she was, she's left a career and she's kind of in this decision zone of like what to do next. And she was in a very lucrative career before and she had an interview for it. If it feels like a soul death, if going back to corporate feels like a soul death for you, or if doing anything feels like a soul death for you, it's not what your soul wants you to do. And
Yeah.
like something else is better out there for you. Something else is greater. Like just starting, also like thinking about the finances too, like earlier on, like if you do know you do want to start a venture, like start planning as early as possible. Like start funneling money into, yeah.
One thing that I would just add on that is, like, be open to what comes your way, right? When I decided to leave that company to launch Motette, I actually had no idea that I was gonna start a children's sleepwear brand all based around bamboo fabric. Like, had no idea that that's what was going to, like, come to fruition, and that was based on all the information that I captured, and so ultimately, like, finding that factory where they specialize in these, like, bamboo fabrics and these this eco-friendly material, right? Versus, like, had I been so set on this, like, and single-minded on this, like, one vision for what I wanted, I wouldn't have gone down this path, and so it was, like, just about being open to the possibilities, and that's how, like, ultimately I got here. I always wanted to start my own thing. For most of my life, I didn't know what that looked like, and so it's really just, like, being open, having different conversations. I think to your point, like, you mentioned our mutual friend Maggie, like, I am constantly connecting with other women and other founders, even, just interesting people, right? You just never know, like, what different opportunities or relationships are going to come through having those conversations, and so my advice would be just, like, have an open mind.
Definitely one of the most, like, social people I've ever encountered. You are like a little hustler networker. I'm like I, like, mention one person, you're like, "They're my new best friend." I'm like, "We meet every week." I'm like, "What? I th how?" Like and it is something I really admire about you because 'cause I'm, like, quite the opposite. I feel like I'm just, like, this little, like, introverted gremlin that I have to really, like, force myself to be social, so I really admire people that are, like, naturally very social and extroverted and, like, outgoing in that way. This is the Big Fucking Dreams podcast, so I will always want to close it on asking, clients, like, what is one thing that you have done that has helped you achieve your big fucking dreams?
I thought you were gonna ask me, like, "What's my big fucking dream?" I was like, "Good morning, America." I was ready.
Yeah. We could put that out there as well. Okay, great.
One thing that I've done is just, like, have courage, have faith, like, put yourself out there, like, you fucking got this, okay? Like, you have to be the biggest advocate for yourself, no one else is going to do it for you, and, like, you can do this. You are smart, you are capable, like, go after your dreams.
Love it. No notes. Samantha Gold, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where can they find Motette as well? I know that you are launching. I think when this comes out, it will be right before launch. So I definitely want people to be able to find them if they've got. We do have a lot of moms that listen to this.
I love it. Well, our website is www.shopmotette.com, and Motette is spelled Mottette. And you can also follow us on Instagram at shopmotette. And if you are a mom with babies or toddlers age 0 to 6, I would love for you to join our inner circle and help me develop and grow our future collection. So please reach out in the DMs, and I'd love to hear from you.
I love these products. They're so soft. They're so cute. Also, Sam's daughter, Blair, is the biggest fucking diva in the world. So if you follow her on Instagram, you just see Blair being the diva that she is, just like running around in these onesies, and it's the cutest thing ever. So yeah, I want one of these onesies. They're so soft. Like I want the little matching ones. Well, Sam, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your big fucking dream story. And it was so great for you to join the Big Fucking Dreams podcast.
Thanks for having me. Bye.